When I go to an Ohio State football game, one of the things that you do is I go to Skull Session. Skull Session is in St. John Arena, and it's about 14,000 people pack that arena. And a few hours before the game starts, the band comes in. Now, it's a very narrow tunnel going down to the floor. And as you're sitting in Skull Session, talking and waiting, all of a sudden, you hear the drums. And everybody stands up and cheers, and they get excited, and the band comes down, and you see them come down the tunnel if you sit in the strategic place. And they come down the tunnel, and they're just real tight together, and they come out, and they play the fight song. And the hair on the back of my head, even I do have a few on the back of my neck that stand up. And it's like exciting. And then that transposes into the stadium when they come in before the game. And they play and everybody gets excited and 105,000 people cheer. Except for the few that show up from the other team. There is nothing like that experience. And you expect your team to march onto the field and they come down and you look for a victorious game and you're proud of them and you just cheer and carry on, leading them to victory. And I think that this is kind of the same picture that I see of Jesus coming into Jerusalem. And everybody thinks, man, here's the Savior, here's the Messiah, here's the King of all creation coming in, and Jesus is going to free us and give us victory, and we're going to get away from this Roman oppression and live free lives forever. And yet, we know the end of the story does not take us, it takes us to that result, but not in the way we expected it to be.
So the Pharisees are the other team in this story, right? The Pharisees aren't quite on team Jesus here. But Jesus is making this entrance, and people are excited. And I try to put myself in the position of not knowing the end of the story yet, right? So when we read this passage, where would I be? Would I be with the Pharisees, or would I be along the road with the crowd, spreading out my cloak as Jesus comes in, cheering blessings on the King who comes in the name of the Lord, peace in heaven, glory in highest heaven, and shouting in celebration for this King who has come and has said, I am the Messiah, I am here, who looks nothing like the King that I was expecting. Who looks nothing like the one who is going to come and provide freedom by overthrowing the Roman army, who does not take the steps that I expect to grant freedom. Jesus is totally different than what they were expecting and what they thought they needed. You know, in the Old Testament, we read often of Israel asking for a king. Right? God removed kings. God, did not give them a singular leader, and they beg and beg and beg for a king. And so God gives them kings. And here I think it's kind of similar, right? The people are waiting and waiting and waiting for this king who will free them from oppression, and the king comes and looks nothing like what they thought.
Yeah, and the king came, and we expected this conqueror to come in. And it was just this caring, compassionate Jesus. The Jesus who brought the little children to come to him. The Jesus who loved his disciples and he loved people. The Jesus who, when he was walking and the woman touched his garment and she was healed. The Jesus who breathed new life, who raised Lazarus from the dead. The Jesus who was honored, as we talked about last week, honored by Mary and anointed. And he was this gentle, caring, compassionate Savior.
And he's riding a donkey, right? Kings don't ride donkeys. Kings ride the biggest, strongest horse that they can find, sometimes with a chariot and all these ornamental dressings on the horse and everything, and a crown, and the king is decked out. And Jesus is saying, go untie that colt. Go get that donkey. And to me, that's a sense of this humility that Jesus is bringing, of who Jesus is. Jesus is king. Jesus is coming as a king. But Jesus is coming as this gentle, humble king. Not to say that Jesus won't rebuke when needed.
Right.
Right? Especially the Pharisees, the religious leaders were rebuked frequently by Jesus. But the personality that is portrayed of Jesus simply by him coming in on a donkey, rather than this strong steed of a horse, encapsulates this whole picture of Jesus.
And Jesus shows that shortly after this story is when he does clear the temple. He shows his strength as needed, when it was important, when it was right. Mm-hmm. But he came to redeem us as a loving, compassionate Savior. Mm-hmm. I often think of, you talked about your perspective of the story. Sometimes I wonder if I were Jesus sitting on that donkey riding in, knowing what the rest of the week was going to look like. And looking at the crowd and seeing those who were authentic in their worship, seeing the Pharisees off to the side doing a little bit of murmuring and talking, we don't want to stir this crowd up, so we're not going to do anything now. And I'm wondering, though, what about those who were along the side of the road and were throwing their cloaks and worshiping, and yet later on in the week would be yelling, crucify him, crucify him. Another story popped into my mind, and it was back when George Bush was running for his second term. And I was at a funeral in a cemetery in Piqua, Ohio. And I was wearing a suit and a tie, and I was all dressed up. And I went, and as I was driving out of the town, there was the big caravan coming through of a campaign caravan. And so I got out of my car, and I was just standing on a corner, and I had dark sunglasses on. And I was standing there, not realizing what I looked like. And here's this caravan coming through town, and people were coming up to me, and they were going, "Excuse me, sir, is he coming soon? Excuse me, sir, is the caravan coming?" And all of a sudden I realized they thought I was part of the Secret Service. So my answer was, yes, he's on his way. He'll be here soon. And I kind of chuckled and played that part. I played that role. And when the caravan came by, there was President Bush just waving at me like I was somebody. And everybody kind of looked at me like I was. I was falsely in a place acting like someone I really wasn't. And I'm wondering, as Jesus looked at those who were falsely there, what his thoughts were. And as I think about that, I'm going, you know what? He still had a heart of compassion and a heart of, I want relationship with you, and a heart of, I'm going to do what I'm going to do for you on this road. So where is my thinking on that? Was I falsely standing there? I played the game a little bit, but do I falsely do that in my walk with God too? Do I struggle sometimes to just put on a good look? Or am I one who's rallying and excited about Jesus, but not part of the story? Do I let Jesus down because maybe that my God didn't come in a show of power and might? And do I get upset sometimes because Jesus gives compassion, God gives compassion to those who I think might not deserve it?
I think maybe sometimes part of our hang-up is that we have expectations for God. We have expectations of how we think God should act, or how God should appear, or what God should present as for us. And I would say that the people in the crowd on the side of the road, they had an expectation of this king. And when Jesus is entering is a time in which they're all gathered at Jerusalem, right? They had all gathered. And so there are more people there than there traditionally would be, lining the roads of Jerusalem for Jesus to enter as king. And they have this image of what they're expecting. And so there's this box, if you will, that they have put this king, this savior, this Messiah in. And when Jesus comes riding in on a donkey, they're shouting. And then, I can't help but wonder if after Jesus makes the entry, and they see Jesus' next steps and what's happening, they realize this isn't the mighty, powerful, ruling king who's going to overthrow nations with militaristic power. this can't be God. This can't be our Savior, because that's not what we need. That's not what we want. And so they're kind of taking on this role of God by putting expectations and putting God in a box of what they expect to see. And when that is not what they receive, they begin to turn.
You make me ponder a lot. And I kind of wonder, in my own personal walk with God, do I expect and want things a certain way? And I do get a lot of those aha moments of, hey, goofball, quit thinking selfishly, quit thinking of what I want. God is God, and God's going to do what God does for each one of us and meets us in some of the moments where we never expect God to show up. God shows up very loud and very clear, and yet very gentle and very compassionate.